Hello and welcome to another episode of Acceptable Madness. My name is Scott McKinney and I'll be your host today. This podcast is for people that struggle with stress and depression and mental illness and their mental health and all that good stuff that a lot of people go through, and just me trying to make sense of how it's affected me. So I'd like to start by saying that I'm not a doctor, so none of this is medical advice, but more just some guy trying to make sense of it all and help other people along the way. This episode is going to be a little bit different, and I think that the topic at hand could be a little bit darker. So I want to start off by just talking about some slightly more upbeat things before I dive into the actual bulk of it. The first thing is that I've been reading a book called Monster Hunter International, which Alex helped me pick out, and it's a book that's basically like the just culmination of all of the old horror films that you've ever watched, or like old books like Dracula and Frankenstein that you've had to read willingly or through school or something like that. And it's thrown into one pretty decently sized book that is a series, but I'm only in book one. And it's so cool. It's just nonstop action, but it's like somewhat believable, and the oath of a main character is fun to read about, and it's interesting to hear about him single-handedly like beating a stone gargoyle to death with a tire iron, and taking out vampires like crazy and fighting all sorts of undead things. And I know that doesn't seem like a realistic protagonist, but the way that the author, whose name, the book is right beside me, but it doesn't matter. The author has written it in such a way that it's just an exploration of fun horror stuff, and I highly recommend it. Eventually, I hope to start some kind of an online book club type thing with Acceptable Madness, but I'm just not at a place where I feel super comfortable doing that. But that'll come soon. And then I guess the other uplifting thing that I have is my neighbor, and well, I guess I started to, and Alex have also, but we started caring for a stray cat that recently had 6 kittens, and we named her Claudia because it's a pun on the word claw, like Clawdia. And she's adorable, and we've started feeding her more so that, building some sort of a bond with her, and we've been able to play with her kittens and her, and it's just been a lot of fun, and it's been a really nice stress reliever. Now, to end with just some happy things that have been going on with me, I want to dive into this episode. Now, the reason that I think this episode is a little bit darker, even though the title itself can be a little bit misleading because it's How to End Depression. I personally, and I've alluded to this in a lot of my previous episodes and just outright commented on it and said that I'll make an episode about it in the future, but I've never come around to actually doing that. Well, the reason that I think that this is an important episode to have, and why it's a little bit depressing of a topic, is because I think it is completely downright 100% impossible at this moment in time to end depression for good. The reason I say at this moment in time is because I have no idea what kind of weird-ass sci-fi shit's going to come out in the future that's just going to allow your brain to function appropriately without throwing the occasional invasive suicidal thought at you about shooting a harpoon gun straight into the ceiling with a noose wrapped around your neck. So unless there's some sort of scientific thing coming, whether it's a drug or nanobot or whatever, that's going to crawl into my brain and not affect how I'm thinking, other than getting rid of those thoughts, I don't really see an end to depression. Depression, for me, is and will always be a nuisance, but it has become the thing of so many long conversations with people that I am close to. It is the catalyst for so many thoughts and internal dialogue about what it is, how it started, why it's only recently become such a massive, epidemic on society, and why society hasn't been able to respond to it in such a way that has actually been able to help people And depression in itself is just, it's so strange because it affects everybody differently, because it's all just, for me, it's this embodiment of all of my insecurity and all of my self-hatred and all of these other things that I hold up to other people, like my accomplishments and everything, and it just completely crumbles, and it just became this thing, this sculpture of pure self-hatred and kind of just the want to die. And that's so, when you put it that way, it seems like such a broad and unknowing and impossible to describe thing. And that's exactly how I feel depression and other mental illness is. It's impossible to describe it. If I were to try to explain it to someone that has never struggled with mental illness or their mental health, and I were to say that I oftentimes, when I'm feeling I could be feeling perfectly 100% fine, but then out of nowhere, there could be something that causes me to feel differently, and I could have this feeling that I want to bring a gun to my head or do some sort of self-harm to myself so that I never have to exist again. And some people that have never actually felt that or experienced that are just totally just dumbstruck and completely caught off guard by that. And I'm happy for that, truthfully, because that means that those people have never had to experience those thoughts. But it also means that kind of communicating past the barrier of those people, or communicating over the barrier to people that have not had mental illness and trying to explain the severity of these thoughts to them, it feels like such an impossible task. And it kind of is, because it'd be like and this is something that I can't relate to, and it would be like if someone were to explain drug addiction to me. I can empathize with them, I can really try to understand it, and I could try my hardest to feel how they feel. But I will never be able to effectively do it because I've never struggled with drug addiction. And I'm sure that person is happy that I have never had to go through that, because they understand, and better than I could even fathom or attempt to fathom, the damning and problematic things that come with drug addiction. And I wouldn't wish it on my enemies, even though I know how hard, even though I don't know how hard it is to overcome or deal with. I wouldn't wish it on anyone just because of how horrible it has to be for just, I don't know, what could have become or could have started as like a moment of weakness and experimentation turning into this demon that controls their entire lives. And so the reason that I don't see depression ending is because I don't know what causes it. It could be all these insecurities that I have. It could be the way that society's built. I had an interesting conversation with a few friends earlier, and we talked about mental health as a whole and how it started and how it's amazing to be able to live in a time where you have the privilege to consider your mental health. Because think about fucking 100 years ago, people that had asthma, which I do, or people that had, or like women getting burned at the stake for going through menstruation, or, maybe it's not 100 years ago, but we'll say within the past 500 years, all of these things that have become so normalized because just science and medical studies have caught up and just determined that these things are completely natural, such as menstruation and asthma and whatever else. In the past, people that had these ailments were thrown into insane asylums, and they weren't given the time of day. They weren't insane asylums where they were trying to help these people become functioning members of society again. They were basically just prisons where these people were thrown into, labeled as crazy, and then never thought of again. And so in the past, any sort of mental illness was just seen as this taboo thing. And now today, there's massive books documenting every single mental illness out there, and they're hundreds of pages long, and they cover over 100, probably I think the number is below 200, but above 100, like different mental ailments and mental illnesses. And it'll document them with all of the knowledge that people have gained over time. And we have the privilege to think about them in kind of a studious way and think about them in a way that's, it's like, okay, well, you're struggling with this. How can I help you? As opposed to, okay, you're struggling with this. Let's throw you into a padded room and just let you suffer there for the rest of your existence. But what I also feel is kind of a problem that needs to be overcome for the current society, which is actually kind of exacerbating the reason for all of these mental illnesses, is the fact that if you look back to more, ancient times, let's look back, and this might sound kind of far-fetched at first, but I want you to bear with me. Let's look back to like the time of the cavemen, or even we'll go a little bit past that, where there are these tribes of people that have banded together, and their goal was simply for survival. So there's the traditional hunter-gatherer group, and the women are typically the gatherers. They'll do that. They'll care for the tribe, the young ones, the sick ones, everything like that, while most of the able-bodied men will be out hunting to try to provide even more food for their tribe. And within that tribe, everybody has a role that they must follow and they fall into. So everybody's assigned this purpose strictly through necessity within the tribe. So the men are hunting, the women are gathering, and obviously these are broad stereotypes to these tribes. They were obviously more complex than that, but everybody had a purpose. And now today, in today's world, it's really, 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 really hard to find purpose. Because in the past, you were in your own little bubble. And let's say your tribe was like 200 people strong. You would know everybody in that tribe, and you wouldn't have thoughts past that tribe, really. And if you did, you still, for a long time, wouldn't really be able to act past them. Because you would still be constrained by the same kind of role that you were meant to hold. So even if like a hunter in a hunter-gatherer society was thinking like, wow, maybe we could expand and become a much larger society, they were still trapped because they still had to work on that hunting aspect. And I really don't think those aspirations would survive much longer in a society that kind of maintains that function and that kind of hierarchy of needs. So, but in today's world, you can look anywhere and you can find what you're looking for. And it's really hard for people to find ambition to move forward. Like, there's so much media out there that it's so easy for someone to just sit back and totally like just engorge themselves with this media. They could sit back and watch every TV show in the entire world that they can fit into their lifespan and still not even scratch the surface of how much is there, because more is being put out. There's stuff in other languages. There's stuff in other countries. There's stuff everywhere. And so it's easy to kind of fall into these lackadaisical habits of just watching media that's already been created by other people, that really its only purpose is to provide entertainment, and its goal is to not give people the life that they found in like a hunter-gatherer society. And it's not even, and obviously entertainment is important. That's what I love, and that's what I'm passionate about, and along with other things, like I'm more passionate about that than I would ever find passion in becoming a doctor. But both fields are incredibly important. And even with YouTube or something, and Spotify even, there's so many free available things, free with ads, or a slight fee to use all of that content. There's so much stuff that you can just constantly use and enjoy and sit through, and that's it. And again, not to say that this stuff is bad, but what it does is it creates this world where you can kind of sit back, and if you're privileged enough to be in a family where your parents are doing well, or your one parent is doing well or something, and you have money to kind of, you don't have to work to supply your family money, and your goal is basically to just exist and then grow up and then get a job and function in society. The act of just simply functioning in society doesn't seem as fulfilling, at least in my opinion, than maybe something back in older time when if you didn't function in society and you were a hunter-gatherer, people would starve to death most likely because they weren't able to thrive with the food that they had. And they weren't, or there were always limitations. But today, a lot of people, they can easily fall into the trap of, if they feel that the world is growing so fast around them, myself included sometimes, actually most times, but that the world is growing so fast around them and that there are so many people out there that are already more successful than them and are doing what they want to do and are just honestly thriving in this world that seems so set against the little guy that it's really, really, really hard to try to find a purpose and actually stick true to that purpose and have it make you happy. So for someone that doesn't, or that struggles finding ambition or motivation within themselves, and then they look at the world around them, they're like, I want to do something better. But I look at the world around me and there's all the doctors that the world needs, and there's always someone smarter than me doing something else in a field that I don't know anything about, or like curing cancer. If you're looking at that just from the ground, like, I don't really know anything about medicine or modern medicine. I just know that I take it sometimes when I'm feeling sick, and I don't know where I would even begin if that was a passion that I had. If I wanted to like go and try to cure cancer, what would I do for that? Would I get a degree in like biomedical engineering and do a bunch of research? Or would I become a doctor and just do well in my field until eventually some other person comes up with this experimental new thing that could potentially cause cancer? There are so many things that I wouldn't understand and wouldn't know how to begin with. And I wouldn't, and it makes the thought of even beginning feel impossible. And now I've given a bunch of hypotheticals that don't necessarily apply to me, so I'll give some that do apply to me. I am working on Acceptable Madness, and I am not making enough money to really advertise it through paid means. So at least not right now. And so I'm completely reliant upon organic search based on these search algorithms, and it's impossible to rely on that because you never know. You could create the best content in the world, and I'm not saying that's what I have, but you could create the best content in the world every day for the next 1,000 days. And that's something that you should be proud of, and I'm proud of. I've been doing it a lot. Not that I've been doing it every day for 1,000 days, but I've been doing it for a while. And I'm proud of what I put out, but it's still impossible to see, or it's impossible to know when that organic search filter is going to help me. And so, or that organic advertising and all that. And so it's really easy for me to go and look at these other people who have multi-thousand followers or hundreds of thousands of followers, that they started from the same meager beginnings that I'm starting from, and that any person trying to create some content or brand starts from, but they're already so far ahead, or like they came in at the right time doing the right thing, and that's how they thrived. Like someone that started in early YouTube and happened to do something kind of innovative, and they were able to thrive from that. I think of the earlier YouTubers like Smosh, who created like Pokemon in real life, and they were just these fun videos, and YouTube was this new and innovative platform, and all you wanted to do was experience this free content that was fun to watch. And so Smosh filled that market at that time. Now, even Smosh is having a hard time competing, and they were just purchased by another channel that has grown bigger than them, which was Rhett and Link's Good Mythical Morning. And even you can even look at an existing brand and have a hard time understanding how they're surviving because they're having a hard time doing so. And so I look at all of that and I see that even these existing brands who were powerhouses at one point are struggling. What's the point of me even trying if I know that it never gets any easier? And it's a really hard thing to look at and deal with. And so I can look at that feeling, and I can sense that, impending doom and mortality in my brand and even myself. And I can look at all of that. And it becomes easy for me to think, well, wouldn't it just be easier to give up and let someone else do it? It becomes incredibly easy to feel that way. And a lot of people succumb to that kind of thought process. And it's a totally sensible thing to do. honestly, I think I'm an idiot because I keep trying to pursue whatever I'm pursuing, but I never know if it's ever going to pay off for me how I hope it does. And I still enjoy doing it, but I still want some kind of payoff in the future. But what I'm saying is, I don't necessarily feel like I have this totally clear goal and role in society right now, because I'm just this relatively fresh new graduate out of college who has a degree in a field where there's hundreds of thousands other more experienced people in that field already, and I'm trying to find my place in the world. And it becomes incredibly difficult to actually think about that and fathom how hard it is to find success in that. And so in the past, whenever there were these societies, and I apologize, I think my neighbor's mowing the grass, so if you can hear that, sorry, but I'm going to keep pushing through anyway. But it's really hard to look back at these old societies where everybody had a goal, even someone that was struggling with health problems, physical or mental. They had this goal that they were able to hold on to and hold tight, and they were able to be what they needed to be. Even look at a time like the 60s, where most women weren't working at that point. Most men were the sole money, like breadwinners at that time. But everybody had their goal and their purpose because the world was a bit more cookie cutter at that point. Even the houses were cookie cutter. And the men were expected to get jobs and find a wife and support kids. The wives were expected to stay at home, clean the house, cook food, and support the kids. And the kids were meant to grow up and repeat the cycle. And so I think that even back in the 60s, whenever, granted, there was that other entire side, like that more hippie-ish side, and that hippie movement starting around the same time with the Vietnam War and other stuff like that. But there were obviously other sides, but people that came from that traditional, like, 50s, 60s housing, or the cookie cutter housing thing, they had their role. And maybe I'm even oversimplifying it because I never existed in those times, so it's hard to know that for sure. Maybe that there was just as much issue with mental health in the past. But now that we're in today's age, I am starting to see that there are so many people out there that struggle with mental health in a way that is really impacting their lives and is really making it hard for them to get out of bed and exist. And suicide is only growing as a problem. And there are a lot of groups out there that are doing really, really great work trying to help people that are struggling with these thoughts and these ailments, but they can't save everyone. And truthfully, I feel like most people are approaching it in a very broad way that is not really personalized to the people that are going through it. And it's kind of just a shot in the dark to see if you help someone. So not only is mental health in today's day and age a more accepted thing, and it's not as taboo, and it's even in a time where men are more able to talk about their feelings and talk about what they're dealing with. And also, even women are more able to do that as well. Women are traditionally and stereotypically the more emotional of the two, primary genders. I'm not trying to offend anyone, but out of male and female, most females are more, it's more accepted for them to talk about their feelings. But even both men and women at this point in time they've been given more of an opportunity and more of a platform to do so, whether that's through social media or whether that's through these different organizations that are really trying to promote mental health or whatever else it may be. We're at a point where there are so many different things and platforms that are really trying to help people. And so it's kind of hard to even figure out if mental health is only becoming more prominent in today's society because of the fact that it's easier to look at it, because these traditional hunter-gatherer goals have kind of just, they're gone. And now people have, at least in more established countries and places, they have food at their fingertips anytime they want. It's at a reasonable price, so they don't have to, they have free time outside of work, and it's not just working all the time. It's getting easier to afford amenities that people actually need to survive. And so this extra, all of this what they're doing with their time is they're just kind of getting by with, they go to work at a job that they may or may not love, but they have to go to it. Or if they're younger, they go to school, which they may or may not love, but they have to go to it. And then ultimately they come out, and then what do you do there? You have to try to find a way to stay happy and find a goal in life. But in today's world, where there are so many different voices preaching at you and so many different organizations that are trying to, like, I don't know, there's always a marketing message coming at you, and there's always someone else saying something that you wish you were the first one to say. And it's really easy to just totally fall into that realm of why even try? All I have to do is work, get paid, and exist. And that's a really tragic mindset to fall into, because that's, for me, it's a mindset. I usually just label it as complacency. But for me, complacency is one of my biggest fears, because I don't want all of the hard work and potential that I have and that anyone has. Me saying that was not an arrogant comment. I believe that everybody has potential as long as they're open to pursuing it. And I really don't want to give that up because I get discouraged by the world around me. And truthfully, that kind of that desire and that drive to not become complacent is, I feel, one of the main things that's kept me more sane and a little bit more happy. And it's helped me deal with my depression a little bit better. But it's still really hard sometimes, because finding a goal in life is not easy. And it's becoming significantly easier to just accept a position where you don't have to try, or accept a position where it's easier to sit back and read books or watch TV than it is to write a book or make a show. And I don't know what the main causes are for that. I'm sure that there are a bunch of people that are screaming, oh, it's social media. And there's other people that are saying, oh, it's the government. And then there's others that are going, I don't know what it is, but it sucks. And I'm in that third boat, where it's probably a mix of literally everything, that are just these, result of so many unforeseen, there's so many unforeseen consequences of what's happened in society. And all of these steps have been taken to make the world a better place. But the world and society has increased or improved at least a little bit. But in order to do that, my question is, has it forgotten about the population that lives in it, and forgotten that we're still just humans and still just an animal? And animals need to find something to hold on to, or else they give up. And I think we're hitting a point where, with so many different things happening that's making the world easier, whether it's automation, like in the workplace, which make people lose their jobs every day, and will continue to do so, whether it's the fact that it's so easy to get lost in a sea of voices that the only reason that they're being heard is because they can pay a pretty penny that you can't pay, because you're stuck on the bottom of a totem pole, and it's hard to go up that totem pole. There are so many things that it could be, and it's really hard to figure it out. So I unfortunately don't have any of the answers either. This is a very kind of open-ended episode, because I don't know what to say to make people feel better other than try to find a purpose. But in the same breath, I have to acknowledge that it is really fucking hard to find a purpose. Like, I don't even know if I found mine yet, and I feel pretty good about what directions I'm going in. And I felt a lot better about my life recently, but I still don't know if I have purpose. And I don't know if it's purpose that matters. I don't know if I'm just getting caught by a veil of, I don't know, workaholism. I don't know. By just doing everything and just trying to have fun with that. And ultimately the journey, you have to enjoy the journey, not just focus on the goal. And I'm trying to do both, as I'm sure many of you are, but at the same time, it's really hard to focus on the journey when the goal seems so far out of reach that the journey seems futile. Oh man, it's a question that I don't know about. And to simply answer the title of How to End Depression, I really don't think it's possible, and I think it's becoming even harder, which is why it's becoming so much more prevalent and prominent in the world today. That's why you see so many more people committing suicide. Now, there is an easier way to track numbers, so I don't know if there's how many more there are today than there were 50 years ago. But I think those numbers are only going to keep going up until someone, or I guess many someones, because it's not just going to fall on one person. It's going to fall on everybody's shoulders, really. Until everyone can find out how to make people or let people find purpose and really thrive in the world without putting up these impossible barriers between them and their goals. That sucks. Truthfully, it sucks. It's a really unfortunate truth to look at. And maybe I'm off base for a few reasons. Maybe that walk back down into thinking about caveman era time periods and the involvement there, maybe that's a little far-fetched. But even if where I'm coming from is a little bit off base in some of your opinions, then ultimately that doesn't matter. I still think that focusing on mental health is becoming harder, and people finding purpose is becoming even harder yet. And I wish that I could have a conversation with literally like everyone on the planet and just be like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Think about whenever you were a kid. Think about what you wanted to be as a kid and how your opinions have changed. Did you want to be an accountant? Did you want to sit back and look at numbers? If you did, great. If you didn't and you're only fulfilling that role because you don't know what else to do with your life, is that really what's going to make you happy? And if it does, great. I really want you to be happy. But if it doesn't, really focus on what you were thinking about, what you wanted to be as a kid. Whenever I was a kid, I wanted to be a chef. I didn't know how to cook a damn thing, and I wanted to be a chef. And now, 15 years in the future, I look back at that kid and I thought he was adorable and smart because I love cooking just because of the act of creation and making something. And man, I love burgers, and they're so good and fun to make. And other times I said I wanted to be a comedian, even though I didn't know I didn't have anything funny to say. And now I'm looking back and I'm making these videos that I hope can make a few people laugh. And so I look back at all of these child adolescent views that I had and these thoughts and these views of what I wanted my life to be. And so many of them had turned out right and just correct. And they're exactly, even now, years and years and years in the future, a lot of those views that I had are spot on. And now that I can see that, I realize that maybe those adolescent thoughts that I had were really just being suppressed by my views of the world and what kind of role I was expected to fall into. Now, happily for me, I managed to go to college for marketing, and I fell in love with marketing too. And I never would have guessed as a kid that marketing would have been what I wanted to be, or what field I wanted to be in. But I got lucky there, and I know that there are a lot of people who don't and just fall into this format that they're expected to fall into. I don't think depression's going to end, but I think that there could be a really honest conversation about how to make it, how to cut down on the amount of people we lose to it. And I think that we could really try to find purpose for people and help them find purpose in a world that's really hard to find purpose in. So, anything you can do to do that for yourself or for other people, really try to help them. Really try to make an effort and try to find your own purpose and help that other person find theirs. Because if you can find purpose, then you're way less likely to feel like you're a burden on the world. Because you're not just getting dragged through the mud. You're able to trek through it and clean it up a little bit. So thank you for listening. I hope that this didn't send you into a spiral of uncertainty and into the abyss of fear and whatever else lies in there. But I think that understanding where it comes from is one of the most important ways to end it. Because if you can figure out how it started, then you can combat it. And for me, I think it started from my lack of purpose. Now, I don't know if that's 100% true, but it's a start. And it might be what what's causing you to feel bad too, and it might be that thing that you have to start focusing on to feel a little bit better. And if it's not that for you, I wish you the best of luck figuring out what it is, or what actually causes it, so that you can fight against it. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for all your support on Acceptable Madness, and I really hope that I really hope you can find happiness in everything you do. Thanks again. Bye.